Thank you, Laura, and thank you for everyone for taking the time to be with us today. And Laura, thank you for giving me the opportunity to chat with your wonderful audience. We're going to run through a presentation here. So basically, we've run a survey into the state of scientific marketing. So we've surveyed over 160 marketing professionals within the scientific space. This is the third time we've run this now, and each year we're getting more respondents and better detail and better data, so we can really start seeing some really interesting trends. And we put that together in a market report, which I'll share with everyone on the call towards the end. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the key points, not rather than go through everything, just pick out 3 or 4 key points that I think are interesting, and then provide a couple of tips for how we suggest you utilize the insights that we're providing. So it was marketing professionals within the space we surveyed. We asked them a variety of questions about their marketing strategies, their overall goals, and the tactics that they utilize in order to achieve those goals. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more. Why we did it, why we're doing it. We're doing it so we can provide sort of industry benchmarks, so companies can compare themselves against other companies. If they're considering a new tactic, maybe they can see, that there's not that many people doing this, so maybe that's a potential avenue to go down. And also, we want to be able to provide data and insights that can help you develop your own strategies and enhance your strategies where you're looking to do so.
I know it's what comes up all the time with our SAMPS members are people asking for benchmarking, like what is a good open rate, what is a good click-through rate. And when you look up in Google, it kind of gives you very generic open rates for probably B2C, whereas having the data for people that are selling to scientists specifically, that's really why we wanted to chat about this today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you look at any sort of benchmark report, especially anything to do with advertising or open rates or click rate, it's always much higher when it's B2C, isn't it? So you're always trying to compare yourself, but then realizing actually we're working in a different space here. So that's one of the aims and one of our goals going forward, is to continue to do this. And over sort of 5, 6, 7, 8 years, we're going to get better data each year, and it's going to sort of set the industry trends is what we're looking for. And then of course we want to share it with as many people as possible. Before I dig into some of the results, one of the sort of nicest things that came away from it was that 90% of respondents were optimistic about their marketing plans for 2022. So I'm sure when we asked that previously, it wasn't quite as high. So that was a nice thing to find out, and a good way to start. As Laura said, I work for AZoNetwork. We share science, technology, and medical stories with those who can make a difference. That's our company motto. We run 11 industry-specific sites, including AZO Life Sciences and News Medical Life Sciences. And my particular role is that I run our virtual events for clients and for our internal webinars, podcasts, things like that as well. And by all means, please do check those out if you're interested. And then I'm going to run through, like I said, I'm not going to go through the entire ebook. I'm just going to run through these sort of key points today. So start off by looking at some of the results with regards to marketing priorities. We're going to dig a little bit deeper into social media and how you can increase your brand awareness on social. And then we'll finish off with some ideas about your virtual events and face-to-face events and how you can incorporate the two. We would love it, Laura and I, if we can answer any questions as well, make this sort of a two-way conversation rather than just us talking to you. So if you do have any questions, please do throw those in, and we'll try to get to as many as we can at different points throughout the webinar. So if we start off with the first question that we asked, which was about marketing goals, and probably unsurprisingly, that lead generation, driving inbound sales were the two that had the highest results. We weren't surprised by that. I'm sure no one on the call is surprised by it. Brand awareness was in third, and then, as you can see, moving down, building subscriber base was the lowest. Now, I think all of these are valid goals, and lead generation, of course, is one of the key focuses of any marketing department. But what we saw when we dug a little bit deeper into this was that, and through other research that we do, is that lots of marketing and lots of companies treat leads very differently. So we ran a webinar recently where we asked the audience what they did with their leads, and there was quite a large percentage of people who passed every single lead that came in onto sales without any sort of lead nurture or scoring process in place. And this isn't something that we necessarily recommend. The content that we provide, the insights we try to give are about making marketers within companies sort of champions within their organization. So we want you to be the team within your organization that is driving the business. And we find that if you pass every lead on to sales, that's less likely to happen because a lot of those leads aren't going to be in sort of buying mode or even in I want to have a call with you mode. So we really recommend and suggest having some sort of lead scoring in place based on intent levels. So if someone signed up for a webinar or downloaded an ebook, we don't consider that to be showing any sort of buying intent. We recommend that that would be sort of top of the funnel sort of content. And then, of course, if they're putting their hands up and saying, we want to talk to you about this, we want to talk to you about this product or this product, that's when we recommend that you're passing those leads on to sales, because obviously they're showing some buying intent. Laura, I don't know if you would agree or have anything to add if you're doing any lead scoring yourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it would be more from our client point of view. So obviously we work with hundreds of life and applied research companies, and it really depends on the size of the companies. You know, our startups are delighted to get anything through. So of course they're going to be handed to the sales guy. But you know, the Thermos, Illumina, 10X's of the world obviously have a much more sophisticated lead nurturing sort of pipeline that they will take it before it goes to sales. There always is that sort of natural friction as well between sales and marketing. If you do hand something over a little bit too early, then the sales guys maybe won't be as happy, and just that the normal sort of friction, which I think is probably healthy to an extent. So I'd agree. It just sort of depends on the circumstance of the company and how big they are at the time.
Yeah, so absolutely, I agree. The friction between sales and marketing, I think, is a healthy thing. It's a good thing because you want to be challenging each other to achieve better results. And interesting you say about the smaller size companies. So when we dug into that 44%, it did. There was a much higher percentage of smaller companies that had lead generation as their top goal, and it tends to be the ones that are handing more to sales, like you say, because when you're starting up, you want to try and generate as much business as you can as quickly as you can. It tends to be the sort of more advanced companies that have got more sophisticated processes in place. But if you can have any sort of lead scoring, even if you're just getting started, it really does help to sort of build that relationship with sales and ensure that you're passing on the best quality leads. Not just because it might waste their time, but also you can have a negative impact on your brand as well. If you're following up every single lead and treating them all the same, and you're bombarding them with calls or however it is that you follow up, it can put people off, especially if they're in the research stage. So that's why we'd always recommend having some sort of nurture program in there, inviting them to an extra bit of, or to download an extra bit of content rather than, are you ready for a sales call? That might be the best way to look at it. But yeah, interesting to see that lead generation and driving inbound sales was the top and unsurprising as well. Now, in terms of achieving all of those goals, then we looked at how companies were achieving those goals, but then looked at the tactics and what companies were ranking as their sort of top priorities. Laura, any surprises on there for you before I dig
Well,
into
I'm sure you were disappointed when you saw how low the podcasts were, and I guess that's mostly because of the amount of effort required to do that. And there is, of course, a balance, you know, in terms of effort and reward. SEO is maybe, I don't want to say less effort, particularly if my colleague on SAMPS, Adam, is here, because he's all about SEO, and I know it's very sophisticated and awesome. But at the same time, putting together a podcast, as you know, is, you know, a lot of effort. So I feel like this graph almost has a balance of effort and reward as well, apart from display, which I'm amazed 30% of people are even mentioning.
Yeah, so I was surprised by the display. I was expecting display to be way down the bottom. The podcast, it didn't disappoint me, because we're obviously big advocates of podcasts. We love podcasts. We think they're great for brand awareness. We're seeing more and more clients start their own podcasts as well, which is great to see. But like you say, it's not a sort of straight to market sort of thing. It's a long-term brand awareness play where you're going to be educating your audience over a long period of time, and that's going to help build your brand and generate interest and keep your company top of mind. But in terms of instant reward, it's definitely lower down. compared to things like SEO and email. So yeah, not surprised at 7%, but also, is it a possibility? Are there lots of people within the life science space that have started their own podcast or using it as a brand awareness play? I don't think there are many. So it's possibly something that marketers can look at.
Like do Laura have a partner, Life Science Marketing Radio, who do brilliant podcasts. So getting involved with them might be an easier way to get into the podcasting world without having to actually create your own. But I do think that probably creating your own is probably beyond what a lot of people have the resources for at the moment. Yeah,
and that's absolutely a great way of getting into it. So Chris who runs that podcast.
Yep.
If I'm not mistaken. Yeah. So a lot of his guests will be people just dabbling and getting sort of testing the waters there. So that's a really good way of getting involved. But then if we move across display, we were surprised by that. Paid search, we can sort of see that's low down the priority list. I think it's becoming a less important way of getting people to your website. And then if we move to the other side, webinars obviously increased the amount of webinars, video, everyone loves video. Email, which Laura, I know you're a big advocate of, and will have more insight than me, but 65% prioritizing email, which is, although everyone will try and tell you it's always dying, it's never dying. It's the best direct to person, like one-to-one contact, isn't it?
I mean, it went up during COVID as well because people were traveling less, particularly, the researchers, they tended to be in the lab less, doing less, research. They tended to be on their computer. There was an issue that you needed to rise above the noise because they were getting more emails as well. But absolutely, for across the board, the response rate went up on email. I love LinkedIn as well. So I do love the social side, and it would be interesting. I don't know if you have a slide that breaks down social into different categories. When you say social, do you mean LinkedIn or do you mean ResearchGate, or are there other sort of social avenues that people have mentioned?
So we're going to touch a little bit on that in a while, but so we've broken down the networks that people are using. ResearchGate was really, really low down. We were expecting it to be a lot higher, to be honest. But I'll touch on that a little bit more in a moment. But like you say, with emails, people were on the computers more. Same with webinars. We've seen a massive increase in the amount of people coming to our own webinars and to client webinars as well. That's dropping down a little bit now because I think people have been to so many. And that's another thing we'll talk about in a while, about how you can stand out from the noise in terms of your webinar and virtual events in general. But if we go from one extreme to the other, so SEO at 68%, why is SEO such a top priority? Like Laura said, perhaps it's a bit easier and the reward is quicker and more obvious than some of the other tactics. But essentially, it's because it's a really important step in any buying journey. So if you consider the way you purchase anything yourself, doesn't have to be within work, in your own personal lives, be it a car, a house, or whatever, you are likely to start the research part of that process with a search on Google, or with a search on a search engine. And as that stat shows, most of those are going to be on Google. So if you're not appearing in the sort of top first page results for your important keywords, then you're not going to be on the buyer's sort of vendor list when they come to making more informed decisions. So I think it's a top priority because people understand the importance of being on the first page and for generating good quality, relevant traffic. Having a good strategy will magnify your visibility, builds authority because you become associated with those keywords, and obviously will help you to get new customers in the long run. But because it's a high priority for so many people, and because more people are putting more resources into it, it is becoming a lot more competitive, particularly for your sort of common keywords. So what we're seeing more and more of now, what we're suggesting more and more of to clients, is that they have more of a focus on the long tail keywords, which will perhaps have less competition. There are over 200 ranking factors that Google takes into account. I can't name them all, so please don't ask that in the Q&A. But there are lots of things you can do, as well as creating consistent quality content to help boost your rankings. Things like ensuring the user experience is good, the speed, the loading speed of your pages, lots of different factors that we could spend hours talking about. But
we do actually, we have a few webinars as well on that. As I mentioned, my colleague Adam had done one on SEO, so you'll find that on our website as well. I do think the most depressing statistic for, Bing, the search engine, the #1 search on Bing is Google, which I just think must be so depressing for them as a company, but I always think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, no, it's crazy how Google basically owns the search space in general, and maybe that will, like with regulation changes in the future, maybe that won't be the case. But for the time being, when Google dominates pretty much universally the search space, we really, being top first page, ideally top on the first page for your keywords is really important. But SEO itself is it is complicated. It is a science within itself. It does involve lots of testing, consistent experiments, and it's definitely not a set and forget strategy. It is something that you're going to have to keep coming back to and spending some time and effort on. So great to hear that Laura's got some webinars on that. So yeah, I absolutely recommend checking those out because if it is a priority for you, as it is for over 2/3 of the audience that we surveyed, then I'm sure there'll be some great tips in there that can help you out. But so if SEO is the part about getting your relevant audience to your website, the next stage is to convert those into leads. So it was very helpful when we were putting this presentation together that the top marketing challenge that came back was that CRO, or conversion rate optimization, if you're not familiar with it. So like I said, if SEO gets the relevant traffic to your site, CRO is all about the best formula to convert those into leads. So why are people thinking more about CRO is because little changes can make a massive difference. So if you're not familiar, CRO is essentially where you run some A/B tests. So you take a part of your website, be it the navigation bar, call to action, something like that, and you change the copy or the color, and you show that to two different people. So if I'm going on to AZoNetwork.com, I might see one example of the navigation bar. Laura might go on and see the second example. And the idea is to present data after a period of time that will show you which works better, which converts more. It sounds like it's a lot of work for not that much, but if I just take our own site as an example, our original contact button was just on our normal navigation bar. There was no difference in color. There was no background. There was nothing. It didn't look like a button. We put a red background behind it, and within 4 weeks, there was a 900% increase in inbound leads, which we were obviously happy with. And it sort of led us to try more testing. This was quite a while ago now, so we started trying other testing. So we started testing the copy of that button. Should it be speak to an expert? Should it be book a demo? Should it be contact our sales team? And these are things that people in our spaces can try out. It might be that you want to try out book a demo versus speak to sales. I would imagine book a demo would probably drive more traffic, but that's just my opinion. The beauty of this is that you would test that, and after 4 weeks, you'd have example A drove this many, example B drove this many, and then you've got data-driven. Then you could be making data-driven decisions to stream your customer journeys, and more importantly, to increase inbound leads. So that's what it's all about. And it was interesting to see that was a big challenge for a lot of marketers. I don't know, Laura, if you've done much CRO stuff or looked at it at all.
Yeah, like we had a funny one, which it's not always intuitive, which is why you do the A/B testing. But we had on our pricing page, we had get a quote, and people were putting that, and it was basically the majority were journalists looking for a quote for their write-ups. And we're like, no, so we've had to change it to be get pricing, which obviously has then streamlined it. But I think a lot of the examples this is an example where we can take from outside of our sort of applied and life science industry. Spotify, they massively increased their downloads. They used to have a download button, and they just changed the copy to say, let's start listening. Yeah. And it sounds really basic, but it completely shot up the amount of people that were actually going to download it. So definitely worth testing. And I mean, it doesn't need to be sophisticated in A/B testing. It can be, obviously changing the website copy. It really doesn't need to be that big a deal. You don't need to do it in tandem. Obviously, you guys are a bit more sophisticated than maybe some of the smaller companies would be able to be. You could also just say, okay, this week we're going to have it say this, and next week we're going to have it say this, and just change the whole thing rather than having, the ability to do it in tandem.
Yeah, absolutely. It doesn't have to be. That's just the one way we do it. We use a platform called Google Optimize. And that's an option, but absolutely you can do it over a period of time, like you say, test the contact us button with one set of copy and then change it after 3 weeks and compare. It doesn't just have to be the contact button. You can test it with call to actions in blogs, in product pages. You'll be really surprised the differences it can make. And well, we were really interested to see the results on our own website, and we've started doing it for a lot of clients, and I know they're really enjoying having the data to then make the data-driven decisions, like we said. So yeah, it's an interesting one and something that doesn't always, like, just thinking about it, that can't surely make that much of a difference. But like I said, with our page, 900% increase in a month, we're obviously going to keep it the way
or a color
with
change.
the second option. Yeah, just for a color change, which is crazy. And what you were saying just before, with Spotify, with our webinar, this is a little secret, but with our webinar emails, we've started, we always used to put register now, and we've changed that to book your place. And that's had a huge difference, that made a
Very
huge
interesting.
difference.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know if because register now has sort of, it's too familiar, it's been used by everyone forever. So I don't know if it's just the change that's striking a chord with people, or maybe it's
I would
because
say,
your.
To be honest, I mean, there is a psychological phenomenon where if things are scarce, you're more likely to want it. I feel like book your place kind of gives a comment or the idea that they're limited. There was a really lovely example of, those QVC channels where they sell their products online, and they brought a new boss in, and they changed they like completely like revolutionized the amount of sales. They put it up by like 1,000% because they changed the writing that went along the bottom of the screen, and they changed it to be, if our lines are busy, please call back, which intuitively you would think is really unhelpful, because you would like to think if you called up, someone would actually speak to you. But actually it made more people call because it really gave the urgency. It gave the sense that it was scarce. So I feel like actually book your place, that's what that's doing. And it's interesting that, I have a psychology degree, so I can have an idea that might be what happened. Whereas with your A/B testing, you didn't really have a hypothesis as such. You were just trying a few different things, and that's what stuck. So you don't even need to know why maybe things work. You just need to know the data is there, whatever,
So with the webinar call to action, we had a hypothesis before. We thought that book your place was going to be better because of what you were just mentioning, and then it turned out to be the case. But with the contact button and with changing the copy on that, we didn't have any inclination beforehand that one was going to be better. We just thought we'd try something. And this is basically what clients are doing as well. They're trying different call to actions on their product pages quite a lot of the time. And they're seeing some really interesting results by just making very small changes. So it's an interesting topic, and one I think we'll see a lot more of as people are getting more traffic to their site. It's what can you do now to really drive those inbound leads. So yeah, really interesting. I'm glad to hear that you've been doing some interesting stuff with it as well. And then finally, just to wrap up this section, before we can talk a little bit more about email, maybe Laura, that it was interesting. And I know everyone says that the pandemic sped up the sort of digital revolution, and it's become a bit of a cliche that it's just sped things up 5 years or whatever. But this really brought that home to us. So over 2/3 of the people we surveyed are looking to increase their digital marketing budgets, compared to only 37 who are likely to increase their offline marketing spends. And when you consider that people will be going to events next year and they didn't last year, so that's already an increase in offline spends. That's a really interesting statistic. And yeah, it's definitely digital first. I think is definitely here to stay within the life science space. Yeah, that was a really interesting and reassuring stat for us as well, because obviously that's the industries in which we're operating. But yeah, so look, before I just wrap the SEO bit up, Laura, do you want to maybe share some insights about the email marketing a bit more. So in the ebook, it does go into sort of open rates and things like that, but perhaps you're in a better position to chat more about sort of industry trends and benchmarks.
I mean, in terms of what you just mentioned, in terms of the sort of the trade shows coming back and it being an, offline marketing spend, we've actually seen a lot of people that are doing hybrid marketing then. So there was a really great initiative that actually won our SAMPS Awards. We run a SAMPS Awards every October, and it highlights people in the industry that are doing great things. And the award for marketing campaign was for Mobileon Systems, and they did an award for ASMS, the Mass Spec show. And they had like a treasure hunt, which is fairly common when it comes to attending shows. But the new thing was they also involved people that were attending virtually or that weren't attending. And I think that that's what we're going to see a lot more of, because people are used to now being able to get access to the information without necessarily traveling. So I do think, of course, shows are going to come back and they're going to be awesome, because to be honest, there's just no substitute to meeting people. But there will need to be that offline element in your marketing spend as well, and trying to engage the people that aren't at the particular shows to make sure that that's there. Email marketing, I mean, I love it. As I say, I love LinkedIn as well. To be honest, we get a better conversion rate on LinkedIn than we do on email, but it's just not scalable, particularly the way LinkedIn have now limited the requests to 120 per week. And LinkedIn emails don't work. It doesn't matter what industry, if it's pharma or academics, they don't accept. So if anyone is thinking about using LinkedIn for their sort of lead generation, then you're much better connecting with people. But because LinkedIn have limited that to 120 per week, we have to rely on email. There's just no way around it. If you're not maxing out your 120 LinkedIn connections every week, though, there's something wrong. You absolutely should be. They're like gold, because the conversion there is much more. And if anyone wants to hear more about that, they can ping in a question. There are a few weak questions. There was a chat there about Chris Connor, so obviously that detail is now in the chat. Thanks for sending that through. And people are asking about the slides and whether they'll be available after. There's actually a much more in-depth report. We're taking out a few high-level sort of snippets of it in this chat today, but the report is lovely, and we'll send that to everyone that has registered after the event, so you can go through in more detail, along with Danny's details as well, so you can ask him more information on any aspect.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely happy to share the slides as well, but like Laura says, the ebook goes into much more detail. It's much well, this is quite a nice presentation too, but it's much better presented, and yeah, we'll have all this information in as well, so we'll share that with everyone. But interesting what you were saying about LinkedIn, Laura, because that's basically what we were going to move on to next. So we then wanted to look a bit more at social media, because it's an area that we get asked a lot about. A lot of people have concerns about how they can use social within life sciences, because they don't know where to start. So we wanted to find out what platforms companies were using to promote. And if we go from left to right, so TikTok is still very small, but again,
I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask Laura if you use TikTok, or if you know.
I don't. I've realized when you realize that you're old is when you don't know how to do something, but you also don't care. And that's sort of where I've got to with TikTok. I'm just like, that's probably not for me. I will just leave them to it. They can go on ahead. Snapchat was actually the first where I was just like,
yeah.
And I mean, personally, I don't know if, life science companies have any business on TikTok or Snapchat, if I'm honest, because I just don't know who wants to see fluorescent microscopes in TikTok unless, grass cells are fabulous under a fluorescent microscope. So maybe that's what they're showing. But otherwise, I just not sure that content could be particularly compelling.
Yeah, so that's basically the same conversation we've had internally here, because we do work with a couple of clients who have started using TikTok, but they're struggling to find the right sort of content for it, and it's become very similar. So Instagram's becoming more video based as well, so it's similar sort of short form video content. So it's interesting that, I mean, still only 2%, but I imagine that's only going to get higher as the younger generations move into more senior positions. So, but yeah, I'm with you. We've got a younger team, some of the younger guys here who talk about TikTok, and I've no idea what they're talking about, so I can't give an informed opinion on it. But I trust them to if it's a space that we should be in, I'm sure they'll tell us. But it's interesting that people are already exploring it, and I expect that to go up over the years. But then the other interesting, the two interesting points here is that YouTube going down 10%. I mean, that might be because more people now, if they're creating long form videos, they tend to be embedded within their website. So the people responding to this wouldn't necessarily associate that with being on YouTube.
I would say so. Yeah.
I think that's probably the main factor, but then potentially also that short form videos are becoming more popular on social, but then webinars are also becoming more popular. So I think it's more the first point it's more likely there. Facebook, they don't do many things well, but they're one of the things they do well. I mean, they're probably listening to me, so I should be nicer. One of the things they do well is they've made it very easy to create sort of closed groups where you can start to build communities. I know there are a lot of good life science communities on Facebook as well. So it's good at doing that. It's terrible for organic reach. So if you're using your company Facebook page, it can be very difficult. More and more of our clients are using Facebook advertising, but that's become more difficult since Apple have brought out iOS 14. So yeah, that's a tricky one as well. But in terms of their groups, they are really good. And then unsurprisingly, almost 100% of people are using LinkedIn. So like Laura said, building your own networks is usually the best way to go with LinkedIn. Company pages, although they are looking at this, I understand at the moment, tend to have fairly poor reach in comparison to individuals posting content on behalf of, doesn't necessarily have to be on behalf of their company. We encourage a lot of people to build personal brands, so to speak. Sharing their professional interests don't have to be just things to do with the company. And I think that's a really good way of building a network and because it is about being social at the end of the day. And if you can be top of mind when people are looking for the thing that you sell, the problem you solve, then I think that's a good one. How are you using LinkedIn, Laura? Lead gen? Have you done much sort of creating your own sort of content as well?
So, I mean, again, I can speak from Sally's point of view, but also for all of our clients in the industry. But I attended a talk on one of the SAMPS events. So it was in San Francisco about 3 years ago, and I literally will put down a lot of what I do to that one talk, and it was how to create your LinkedIn profile. And a lot of the guys that maybe were attending that will probably remember it. So basically what was said was, don't have your LinkedIn read as your CV. That is you're selling as a person. And as you said, the company page doesn't really work as well because it's corporate, and people don't buy from companies, they buy from people. So the girl at the time, she said, look, what she put at the top of her LinkedIn was, sales and marketing professional, life science, excellent parallel parker. And she said like 9 times out of 10, the people that were contacting her on LinkedIn were like, about her parallel parking, I'm a truly, truly terrible parallel parker. I only passed my exam because I did it 3 times, and then the 3rd time he never asked me to actually do it, so I got away with it, and I've managed to avoid it the rest of my life, so it shouldn't even be on the test. But that, having something that you can think of that you can put in your LinkedIn to make you there was another girl that I met at SAMPS event, and at the top of her she has that she's a Diet Coke connoisseur, which really resonated with me because I'm also somewhat obsessed. But having that sort of information on your LinkedIn, the first thing I did is I left that talk and I went onto my LinkedIn and I created it. I just wrote it like I'm a normal human being, not Laura has, whatever, 15 years experience in the field. Hi, I am doing this and this is what I love. And that has been huge. It didn't help, or it did help, that I was an extra in Game of Thrones throughout the seasons. And so I did have something kind of cool to put in as my parallel parking thing. And that was good because it resonated with people globally at the time. And it's getting probably a bit old now. I need to do something a bit more interesting that isn't dating. But
I think that's
what
pretty
I put
cool.
in. It was.
So Laura was on our podcast. I can't remember what it was now, a year or so ago. But I remember Frankie, our head of marketing, telling me about you being an extra in Game of Thrones, and we all thought it was so cool at the time. So, and now you just mentioned it, I've remembered it. So
okay, yeah. So having your LinkedIn, so that's the first thing. If you're going to reach out to clients on LinkedIn, having a good profile photo. I mean, not having you and your husband with, you know, his arm cropped off and you can sort of see half a beer there because you were out in the town one night. You know, putting a bit of effort into having a professional photo will go a long way. Then having it read so that people get a sense of you, you know, give them a bit of a background on the roles that you've been in before, because you're going to be reaching out to people and they're going to be looking to see, particularly if you're, you know, trying to connect with scientists, which a lot of us are, whether that be in academia or sort of on the industry. People don't really want to speak to salespeople. I can say that because I'm a salesperson. They want to speak to scientists, people that will give them actual, you know, good conversations on the science and on the product. So if you can big up that sort of scientific background side and put it in, another lovely use case for A/B testing is your job title. Now, not everyone will have the flexibility of being able to change their job title if they're in, you know, a larger company. That's maybe not as easy. But if you're in a smaller company, things like, you know, strategic partnership manager, those sort of titles we find convert much better than sales manager, you know, regional sales. If you can kind of, as I say, not everyone has control over that, but if you can kind of change that a little bit, you'll get a much better response. We find across the board about a 25% acceptance rate when you try to connect with someone on LinkedIn. And I don't know, stop me if I'm going into things that you're going to cover, Danny, but
no, carry on.
In terms of, you know, when you're connecting with people, 25% means that if you add 4 people, so if you're trying to target a company or a, you know, institution, if you add 4 people and one of them should accept, and then you'll be able to reach out and obviously set up your meeting or whatever you're trying to do. So the better that you can have your LinkedIn profile, obviously that rate will improve. And the factor limited to the 120, it's quite important to have that sort of rate improve. But we tend to find that the conversion rates on LinkedIn compared to email are like 3 to 7 times better, which is like incredible. You need email because, as I say, you're limited to your 120 and no one can build a business with 120 outreach a week. But utilizing everyone's LinkedIn and making sure that they're maximizing it. There's other things beyond your control. Unfortunately, if you're a young woman, you tend to get a better conversion rate than the older men. Unfortunately, nothing we can do about that. But the fact that if you make sure that you utilize the LinkedIn at your disposal of your you know, the colleagues that are in that demographic, you'll get a better response rate as well. So we love LinkedIn, we love email, but I'm not surprised, obviously. Well, I'm actually a little surprised it's only 93, if I'm honest. What are the other 7% doing?
Exactly, that's what we thought at first. We thought, yeah, it's high, but what are the other 7% doing? Interesting, the things you were saying about the profile, because there are just some basics, like you mentioned, that can really make a massive difference. One thing that someone pointed out to me a couple of weeks ago, not that I wasn't doing it, but that they see a lot of, was that people have their profile picture on private rather than on public. So when they're doing outreach, it's just appearing as a blank picture. And when you get sent, well, I know if I get sent a request with a blank profile picture, I'm never going to accept it.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's something you can very easily check. You just click on your picture on your profile, make sure it's set to public. That's a very good place to start if you're going to be using LinkedIn more for outreach. The second feature, which I've been meaning to set up for a long time. So I feel like I'm suggesting something and then not practicing what I preach, but having an introduction video on your LinkedIn profile, on your profile picture. So you'll have your initial picture, so people will see that, but then if they click into your profile, you can now add a sort of 20-second intro video. It doesn't have to be, hi, I'm Danny Lazell, I'm a marketing person for blah, blah, blah. It can be, like Laura was saying, telling them a bit about yourself, something interesting.
Show your dogs.
Exactly, a Diet Coke connoisseur, about your dogs. I don't know, something to do with where you're from, anything like that. Something that shows your personality a bit more. Just makes you stand out, because although 93%, and it's probably higher, are using it. Not that many people use it effectively. So if you can do the things we've just spoken about, as well as creating original content, it's going to be quite easy to stand out, because not that many people use it effectively. A lot of people use it for, hey, I'm this person, then send you a monologue, and then can you book a 5-minute call with me? I don't know how you find response rates to that sort of thing, or if you've ever even tried that, but I imagine it's not very high.
Well, I've never tried it, but I get plenty of them to myself a day, so I just cancel them. But they're primarily in mails, and we probably should move on, because we probably do a webinar on LinkedIn alone. But the final thing I'll say is, back to your A/B testing, we've done it, and our clients have done it. If you don't put a message in your connection request, more people accept, and that goes completely against everything that any of us believe in, but that's what the data shows. There's a few questions here in terms of LinkedIn. So they're asking about LinkedIn ads. So you cover that on your graph, or we'll cover it now?
We're not going to cover it on the graph. We can talk about it now.
LinkedIn ads, again, it's sort of that passive approach, isn't it, compared to that direct approach? And I know a lot of the people in the call are on the marketing side, so they maybe they're not necessarily doing that direct approach. But if you can get the inside sales team or the sales guy to actually reach out, rather than, it just gets a much better response. But you're back to that balance of, investment and reward. The ads are easier. You might get some through. Boosting ads is great. Boosting LinkedIn ads, you can segment your audience quite well on LinkedIn. It's much better in our experience than Google ads, because you can really segment that. So, I mean, if that's all you have time to do, then definitely do it rather than don't do it. But if you have the time for, someone on the inside sales team, or maybe you're in the position in the marketing team where you can do the outreach and get the leads, it's worthwhile investing in the time to get that. Getting content is another question here, in terms of, having a, webinar that you have to download. What's your experience on that, Danny?
So we've tried both. So with webinars, we tend to, well, there's obviously the sign up process. So this is our internal webinars now rather than client ones. So for our internal webinars, we'll obviously require people to sign up, but then very quickly after the event, we'll ungate it and have it available to access openly for people. But that's purely because our strategy with our own webinars is because we want to get as many people as possible to consume that content. They're not as much instant lead generation sort of events. They're more, we're trying to educate as many people as we can, and these are the things we also sell. Gates, I think it's a complex question, and I don't think there's a right answer. I think a combination of some stuff gated and some stuff ungated is probably the way to go. Ebooks and market reports and things like that, we tend to gate, but maybe we shouldn't be. Maybe we should be.
You've gated this report?
Yeah, we've gated this report. There was a bit of debate about that, because it's not a lead generation piece of content. It's it's a top of funnel educational piece. So perhaps in the future we won't be gating them. I think we'll see more people moving towards ungating stuff, but it depends on what your goals are at the end of the day. But yeah, that's a question we could talk a lot about.
Yeah,
we've tried both, and we're still not decided on what's the best way to go forward. Essentially. So that's a politician's answer.
More A/B testing required, is what you're saying.
Exactly, lots more A/B testing involved with that.
Another question here is just a clarification. So when I'm saying that LinkedIn in-mails don't work, I mean the in-mails that LinkedIn provides you with, so you can reach out to people you're not connected with, they don't work. Don't waste your time. If you need to connect with the person on LinkedIn, you'll get about a 25% acceptance rate better if you use the tips in your profile, and then you can send them the message. And to be honest, it probably is worth talking about in a future webinar as well, in terms of what that message should even be, because as we know, we get quite a few.
Yeah, so just to finish off on the social side of things with LinkedIn, we find a strategy where marketing's focused on advertising to sort of target accounts, with basically using LinkedIn ads as a distribution, or sort of a guaranteed distribution channel. The way we describe it here is it's like putting, if you have a set of target accounts, it's like putting an advertising board in their office and they'll walk past it a few times per week. And we're not trying to generate leads at that stage. We're just trying to get the content in front of people. And then our business development salespeople will, at the same time, be outreaching to the people within those companies that we're targeting. So it's very much a joined up approach. And I think that tends to be the most effective use of LinkedIn if you are going to use advertising as well.
There's another one that isn't on here. So we had a talk from New England Biolab, so one of the previous SAMPS events, and they'd created an app on Alexa. And the idea was they target obviously the scientists in the wet lab, so they have gloves on and they can't touch anything. And they had a catalog that they sent out to everyone every year, which they still do because everybody loves it, and it tells them all their chemicals and things that I don't understand. But they created an Alexa app because the idea is you can't leaf through a catalog when you've got your gloves on that are potentially contaminated. So you can then ask Alexa for, whatever updates on your chemicals or whatever it is. And it's interesting then having new sort of avenues. TikTok is obviously included in that are coming up. So we'll see if that, appears more on next year's report.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm just trying to think if this was an open, I think we gave a certain amount of social things for people to choose rather than leave it as an open answer box. So maybe in future I know it makes it a bit more tricky for data analysis, but maybe for this question, we'll leave it open so people can share things. But that's really interesting about Alexa, and something I'm sure we'll have another conversation about another time.
We're probably running slightly ahead of time, so we probably need to hurry up and stop chatting so much to see all the nice graphs.
So a lot of what I was going to say about social media we've just covered is about being relatable, not sell. Just one final point about newsjacking or taking advantage of events that are happening within your content calendars that will be relevant to the life science space. I mean, this is another example from Clean Tech, but anything, if there's a news day or a world event coming up that's relevant, take advantage of the fact that there's going to be an increased volume of traffic around that particular hashtag or that particular event. That's something that you can definitely look into. We'll move on about video marketing because I wanted to talk about, because we were talking a bit before we came on the call about face-to-face trade shows and virtual event experiences. So this was fairly unanimous. 83% found virtual trade shows less effective overall than face-to-face events, and just under 60 are likely to attend face-to-face trade shows this year. So a couple of things I think are interesting. Virtual trade shows were, for a period, the only option. So we looked at them as replacing in-person trade shows, but in reality, a virtual experience is never going to be the same as a face-to-face trade show. So how you can combine virtual experiences with your face-to-face event attendance is going to be an interesting strategy to implement going forward. Laura, what were you saying before we came on the air about this? You had some interesting insights on this, I think.
Well, that was the Moblin systems, which I think I had mentioned in terms of them winning the campaign to be able to do both the sort of hybrid of in-person and not in person. I mean, I've found that our clients are being a little bit more cagey about committing to events because we have had a few where the rug's been pulled out from under us. Very, PitCon and focus on microscopy. You're all geared up to go, and then suddenly it's virtual. There have been instances where, it's difficult to sort of cancel your booth because they try to convert you to a virtual booth. And again, I'm surprised that there's 17% people out there that think virtual are better than in, just no comparison. So that's what we find. It's probably about 50%. The exhibition floor is about 50% populated at the minute. I mean, that's pros and cons, probably quite good because there's fewer people that are competing for, the attendees, attention, but attendance is down as well. So normally we would have, sort of 12,000 names for AACR on the side aids because we track attendance and, give it to our clients so they can set up meetings. And I think there's about 6,000 this year. So it is certainly down, but coming back.
Yeah, I think because they were taken away, people are now looking a bit harder at the return on investment. If you're going to spend $100,000 on going to a trade show or what have you, you've got to be really confident that that's going to prove a good ROI for your organization. So I think the fact that they were taken away has made people think a little bit harder about, or be a bit more clear about the events they attend, which is why there are fewer people attending, and also really ensuring that they're getting a good return on that investment. But what I wanted to talk a little bit about was how you can combine virtual experiences with your face-to-face event attendance. So this sort of sample timeline on the screen now, this incorporates a couple of thought leadership webinars before going to a face-to-face event where you might demo your product. So let's say you've got your sort of set list of target accounts that you're looking to sell to. You might invite those to your initial thought leadership webinar, and then use that as an opportunity to gain market intelligence, find out about their challenges. You're not looking to sell to them at this point. You're just looking to learn and present your brand and your organization, introduce them to those at this point. Then maybe the second webinar, a bit more product focused, but again, you're trying to gauge as much feedback from your audience as possible. So you know that by the time you get to the face-to-face event, you've sort of been through the qualifying stage. You know the accounts you really want to talk to because they've shown interest in what it is that you're doing. They're far more qualified. They'll be more interested in the demo that you can then produce for them at the face-to-face event. And then that might be followed up with a one-to-one product focused webinar after the event. So face-to-face is definitely going to come back, and it's a really important aspect of any marketing strategy. But how can you incorporate your digital channels with that so that those face-to-face events are as valuable as possible? We obviously love webinars. Laura, I know you guys are doing lots of webinars as well. Lots of our clients are doing more and more of them now. And if I just move on to this slide, 61% found them to be a challenge in 2020-21. And just under half say they're a very high priority. So it goes back to, how do you stand out again? So what can you do to make your webinars stand out from the noise? And just to finish off this section, we have these 4 key areas that we are always encouraging our clients to think about. So your target audience, is it segmented? Is it appropriate for what it is that you're presenting? Does the content portray the key messages that you want to? And does it help your audience to have a good experience and to understand better by the end what it is you're trying to deliver? Does your speaker and host help to enhance that overall experience? And does the audience leave having learned something and also want to tell someone else about the event they've just attended? Because if that happens, then that's going to be when more sales and more leads are going to come in. So they're the 4 key areas that we look at when trying to create great webinar experiences, and just some tips and hints for people that, Laura, I know we're getting very close to the hour, so I'll just quickly wrap up. This was just some ideas about how you can utilize your webinar content. If you've done a lot of webinars during lockdowns, you're probably sitting on lots of high quality, rich content that you can utilize and repurpose. Each webinar can become a blog post, or it can become an article. You can run key opinion leader interviews. You can take the Q&A from a webinar and turn that into an ebook or into a podcast, if like we were speaking about earlier. And you can create hundreds of social posts just from the content. That could be video, that could just be key takeaways, quotes, anything like that. There really is a lot you can get to enhance your other sort of marketing channels from the rich content like webinars. Shall we take any more questions, Laura, before we finish up?
Yeah, I mean, I think there were quite a few questions came in throughout, which we answered, but if anyone has any others, we will answer them. And otherwise, we will wrap it up there. And yeah, if anyone wants to give any feedback in terms of points of this that maybe would require a further deep dive, Danny's obviously going to give everyone the link. We'll send that out after the call for the actual ebook that you can download. And there's a lot more information in terms of the graphs and the outcomes of those reports, which are awesome. But any other sort of aspects that would be interesting, do let us know, because we'll be happy to get a few panelists in and throw a few ideas around. So
yeah, and sorry, Laura, I was just going to say, if anyone has any questions they want to chat on LinkedIn after this, then by all means do reach out. We've got loads and loads of other content in each of these sections as well that we can share if people are interested. So please do get in touch if you want to know more.
There's a quick question there in terms of the digital content, what's the breakdown between sort of desktop and mobile? I know in our experience, certainly from the email marketing, it tends to be absolutely majority on the mobile side. So you mentioned about making your email short. People come to me and they say, can you help me with my emails? And I say, I don't even need to look at them, but they need to be shorter. They're like, you haven't seen them, don't care. Take out the images and make them shorter, because people are looking on their phone and they're really only looking at the top of it to decide whether they're going to read further. So that's our experience. In terms of yours, Danny, if you got any sort of stats or done any analytics on those sort of things?
Not off the top of my head, there is more stats in the ebook, but yeah, we'd say similarly. So a lot is read on mobile, yeah. So make sure that the key points are in the first line. That's another thing we've A/B tested a lot, is making sure that first line involves the person reading it. So we're not saying, oh, here's our event coming up, or it's, are you interested in learning this, or make it about the person who you want to read. I think that's a pretty good point for most copywriting. But yeah, we A/B test lots of headers as well. So it's interesting you say about images and not including images, because I think you said that on our podcast as well, which we all found really interesting. So we actually reduced our images in our emails after that.
Nice. But it's an interesting one, because if you look at the data, the click-through rate goes down due to the number of images. But if you ask someone, which do you think works better, the more images the people say it works better. So it can cause quite a lot of debate in the office when you say, I'm going to reduce the images, and people say no, but you have to. It's another example of looking at the data. Another quick question. Sorry, I know we're sort of running out of time. So do we think virtual booths will stick around even after the pandemic is over? Literally, like when I say we work with hundreds of clients in this area, we get them the attendee information for the trade shows. So I talk about this every single day. Not one of our clients came back to me to say that was a great virtual trade show, and I'm so delighted things have gone virtual. In fact, they tried them out. They said that was a total waste of everybody's time. I mean, part of the trade show is fun as well, isn't it? So I mean, so no, I can't see the virtual trade shows making any money. They might try, but they won't make any, certainly based on the feedback we're getting across all of our clients.
Yeah, I think there'll definitely be hybrid elements to all events going forward, because it opens doors to markets that couldn't, or to companies and people that couldn't get to the bigger events especially. But yeah, I'm not sure there's going to be a massive rush on virtual booths, to be honest. And they do take a lot of time to put together as well.
Yeah, it's not even, I know you don't need to travel, but it's still, and they still cost, it's not like the exhibition hall was discounting that much.
Yeah.
So we'll wrap it up then. Thank you so much, Danny, for your insights, and thank you for sharing the report with everyone as well after this. And yeah, any other questions, sure, you know our details. Find us on LinkedIn, and when you do find us on LinkedIn, we'll obviously be looking at your LinkedIn profile to see if you took our advice and updating, and looking forward to see your fun fact. Thanks,
yeah, I'm
guys.
gonna have to make sure I've got the video in place before people start.
Yeah, exactly.
But no, cheers, Laura. Really good to do it.
No worries. Bye bye.